Hi, Sumeria's Fane here, and today on Sumerian Otaku, we are going to talk about the people who brought sound to silent film era anime. If you've ever watched anime from the 1920s or the one or two anime from the late 1910s, you might have noticed that things were just a wee bit silent. That is, if the person who posted the video didn't just tack on some old-sounding piano music. While slapping on some period music is a step in the right direction, as there were certainly some pianists who played along with the old anime, there's something missing from the picture when you watch them now. That's because much of Japanese cinema of that time period, including silent films, shadow puppet theater, and anime of course, were narrated by people with the job title Benshi. These Benshi would stand a little bit off to the side of the screen and ad-lib narration as well as character dialogue over top of the silent movies. It was something along the lines of MST3K, and the audience loved it. So much so that cinemas often put the names of the Benshi on the movie posters rather than the names of the actors, actresses, and directors. In fact, Benshi often had a bigger following than the movies that they were doing voiceovers for. A talented Benshi's voice had the power to make even the worst movies not only palatable, but amazing. Again, think of how MST3K can make even the dullest movies hilarious. On the other side of the coin, a terrible Benshi can make even Citizen Kane absolutely horrendous. Again, think of that friend who always loves to riff on movies that they watch with you, but fails miserably. These Benshi would take their jobs quite seriously and dress in business suits, or dress up as the characters that they are emulating on screen. The Benshi, in fact, might have been the first traditional cosplayers. Apart from general narration, the role of the Benshi was also to introduce the movie and to explain things like the fancy projector that the movie was running on, as well as explain foreign customs over imported videos, such as handshakes or kissing. Not that the Japanese didn't kiss, it's just that when they did, it was often confined to the bedroom, and silent screen romances were often littered with kisses. After the movie started, the Benshi would generally work in teams, explaining and narrating the movie as it went on to make it easier for the audience to understand. Indeed, after the movie starts, the Benshi have almost full control over the movie. Perhaps some might think that I'm overstating the role of the Benshi, but I'm really not. A good Benshi has the power to stretch or mold the anime or silent film into whatever shape they would like. They could even change the genre of the movie, making it more serious or more comedic at will. To illustrate this, we'll look at the popular 1905 film, The Reign of Louis XVI. The reign of Louis XVI was deemed anti-monarchical by Tokyo police, and so it was subject to censorship. But the cinemas who had already purchased those reels were not willing to let go of the precious yen, so they simply renamed the movie The Strange Adventures of North America. The Benshi re-scripted the movie and pretended that the sword-wielding French aristocrats were Wild West outlaws. Never mind the fact that they had swords instead of guns. The Tokyo police begrudgingly allowed the movie to continue playing. After all, the audience had no idea that the Benshi were changing the genre, the overall theme, and the location of the movie. In fact, the Benshi had so much control over the movie that the government felt the need to regulate them. In 1920, the Benshi were forced to apply for a special license to allow them to continue being Benshi. If they didn't have this easily revocable license, they simply were not allowed to work. And so from 1920 on, the government had the ability to take a Benshi's livelihood if it deemed that they were putting inappropriate messages into the movies. Anime of the 1920s did generally have subtitles, which allowed them to, in theory, work without Benshi. That didn't mean that the Benshi didn't voice over the movies with subtitles. They most certainly did. However, the movies were created so that they could function without a Benshi if need be. Despite their popularity, the Benshi were not universally appreciated. Indeed, there were some who wanted Benshi out of the cinema business altogether. But why would there be anyone who wanted to put a popular Benshi out of work? Well, there was a movement in Japan that began in the 1910s called the Pure Film Movement. This pure film movement saw cinema as an entirely new art form. There was a tendency in Japanese film to simply set the camera up in front of a kabuki play and record it. Those who embraced the pure film movement considered this absolutely lazy on the part of filmmakers and wanted the filmmakers to quit regurgitating other art forms and focus on the brand new art form they had before them. They wanted film to push the limits and be entirely unique. Now, you might wonder what all of this has to do with the role of the Benshi. Well, the Benshi is a holdover from prior forms of entertainment. The Benshi existed before film did, and were thus an impediment toward film becoming something completely new. Beyond this, the Benshi had the ability to toy with large elements of the film as they saw fit. Those of the pure film movement thought that a film was great because the director had created it that way, not because a Benshi had warped it into that shape. The director was seen as a pioneer in this startling new art form. However, all of the director's work had come to naught if a Benshi changed the meaning of the picture. The pure film movement held that the film was entirely self-contained. The Benshi, as an outside element, had no place tinkering with anything within the film. It is important to note that even though the pure film movement was uniformly against the role of the Benshi, they could not destroy the Benshi. Benshi were simply too popular, and the pure film movement was, well, a hoity-toity film movement. So, how did the Benshi end? Well, the easy answer is that sound killed the Benshi. When the first successful talkie, the jazz singer, debuted in 1927, everybody was talking about it. It had catchy tunes and a fun plot, so pretty much everybody wanted to see it. A tidal wave of sound slowly swept over cinema, worldwide, and before long, even Charlie Chaplin had switched over to sound. Although sound posed an obvious threat to the Benshi did fight against it. At first, the Benshi still talked over the movies, competing with the actors on screen for lines. The Benshi had the choice of either talking in between the lines or talking over them altogether. However, it soon became obvious to all that there was simply no room for both the Benshi and sound in film. The Benshi fought hard and even held a strike against sound film in 1929, but they couldn't hold a strike against the flow of time. The Benshi slowly turned to other forms of work, some fleeing to the radio, some becoming professional storytellers, and some becoming actors themselves. The number of Benshi had already plummeted since the 1923 Kanto earthquake had destroyed most of the cinemas in the region. Their ranks were only depleted more and more by the introduction of sound to cinema. Indeed, the ranks of the Benshi imploded sharply in the late 20s, and by the 1940s they were nearly all gone. Are the Benshi extinct then? Well, not quite, but they are on the endangered species list. Currently, there's only one Master Benshi left in the world, and that is Midori Sawato, and she's currently training only 10 new Benshis. She herself was trained by Shunsui Matsuda, the last of the silent era film Benshi. The art of the Benshi is indeed still alive, but on life support, with only a few torchbearers to bear its legacy. Sadly, the Benshi may completely disappear within our lifetime. Thanks for watching this episode of the Sumerian Otaku. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you want more content such as this. Anime now and always, Otaku out!